What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community. I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is Stan Moss, CEO of the global investment management firm, Polen Capital. In 2022, the firm was recognized by Pensions and Investments as one of the industry's best places to work for the 6th consecutive year. And after this interview, you will understand why. In Stan's 30 years in the industry, he has built a reputation for maximizing productivity while prioritizing the well-being of his workers. I have had the honor of getting to know Stan the last 8 years and am excited to discuss how playing football at Alabama shaped his leadership.
If you kick one in the bleachers, that could be the end of your college career. There was high fear of failure and high repercussions to that failure. Operating in an environment like that with higher levels of fear drives unintentional behaviors. We said, we don't want to do it that way. We want to do it more with a growth mindset to build a culture with a foundation of trust and then build people up to where they can succeed and not have that fear of failure.
Stan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Don. It's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to it.
I'm going to admit, I love Polen Capital. I believe in what you guys do, and I've been honored to partner with you for a number of years in a coaching relationship. But I want to begin by asking you about something that you started doing several years ago. You ask each employee to develop their story in a way that allows others within the organization to get to know them better. And then you share those stories within the organization. Tell me about storytelling and its impact on Polen Capital.
Building great teams starts with trust, and storytelling is a direct link to that trust. We've worked on storytelling as a firm, and each story that's told, you learn more and more about your teammate and have a deeper relationship with that teammate. We do feedback surveys after every one of our firm-wide meetings, and the number one highlight of the firm-wide meetings is the storytelling itself. We'll ask basic questions like, who are you and why did you join Polen Capital? And from those two simple questions, you'll learn much more about the person, kind of what makes them tick, and then why they're part of Polen Capital. No matter if a person's brand new to the organization or if you may have worked with that person for 10 years or more, in that story, you'll learn something new about the person. As part of a firm-wide gathering, we just recently had every single person in the firm present. We had a young lady tell a story about infertility and how that had impacted her life and the struggle she had in having children. Good news is it all worked out, but just seeing that she had gone through that struggle and that she was willing to share that very personal information with the entire group was just amazing. We had people in the organization coming up to her, thanking her for her presentation, sharing that they had gone through similar experiences. So it was quite emotional and a special time at Polen Capital. And we believe that that's helped us as an organization create that bond, that caring, and just having a deeper relationship with one another among teams.
I was there when that happened. Two things really stood out. One, exactly as you said, so many other people came over, thanked her for her openness and her willingness to do that. And many of them had tears in their eyes. But the second thing is that you have to create a safe space for people to feel comfortable telling their story. If they feel like sharing my story could somehow be weaponized against me, to keep me from being successful, then that would be a real problem. When you can create that safe space within a workplace, it changes the way they come to work in the future.
Absolutely. We strongly believe in providing the structure and the resources that will enable a person to be able to come to work as their best self. And importantly, around storytelling, is that you can bring your true, authentic self to work every single day. And by sharing with the organization, that authenticity shines through, that trust builds, and each day is better because of it.
It's pretty powerful.
So I would suggest that the listeners take time to read and learn about storytelling itself. And then most importantly, leadership starts from the top. So share your own personal story with your organization. Once people see that you're willing to do it as the leader of the organization, they'll feel safe and then probably encouraged to share their stories as well.
I know that that was a really important step within your own team when they heard your story. In the spirit of talking about storytelling, I do want to talk about your story. You grew up in Alabama. Your dad was a high school football coach, and you moved from small town to another small town until you settled in Brent, Alabama. Population 3,000. I know that your youthful years weren't always easy, but that you believe that sports could get you out of that environment and maybe produce a new opportunity for you. Tell me about the importance of sports for you as a tool.
Growing up in Alabama in a small town, my parents definitely instilled a hard work ethic in me and my brother as well. Growing up on the farm, doing manual labor, any break we had from school or sports, we were working. We were splitting firewood, we were working with the forestry, we were mowing grass, you name it. From a sports perspective, I love to compete. I would compete in anything. So I just absolutely love sports. I wanted to play baseball, basketball, football, anything that you could play in sports. So I dedicated a lot of my time and energy to sports. Having your dad be the head coach, I would say that it was actually neutral to a disadvantage. There's a stereotype for coaches' children that they get special treatment. So my dad wanted to do every single thing within his power to make sure that I did not get special treatment and that no one thought that I got special treatment. So I felt like I grew up with him being very hard on me from that perspective. So others didn't perceive that I was getting special treatment. On the positive side, I grew up on a football field. So one of the reasons I ended up being able to punt is because from the time I could walk, I was on the football field with a football in my hand, kicking it, throwing it, just playing football. And then going home, particularly after games, we would sit in the living room and we would break down film. We would look at what worked and what didn't work and what lessons we could learn from that. And I thought that was a unique experience of being the son of the head football coach.
Right.
As I was progressing through sports, I was beginning to get interest from colleges that could perhaps be an outlet to get me into a school, perhaps even a better school than I could get in academically. That could be a way for me to succeed and then move away from my hometown, because my parents had taught me, like, hey, you may not want to do manual labor the rest of your life. And that was a very helpful lesson for me to go to college, make good grades, and get a job.
Isn't that amazing how sometimes the best lessons are the ones that teach you what you don't want to do? So you play varsity at Bibb County High School, go Choctaws. And while there, become an all-state selection. As you pointed out, you're punter. You also played linebacker. You played tight end. You were all over the field. I don't know if you got any plays off during the course of any particular game. Is there an experience in that time period of football that taught you a lesson that you still apply in your leadership styles today?
I'd say that the lessons learned from football are not atypical from others. Hard work, discipline, and you're willing to do what others won't do. If you're willing to get up and do 2-a-day practices in the heat of the summer in Alabama, that's a little bit different. The willpower that's needed to be successful and to even be on a team really stands out. I remember my sophomore year, we were playing a rival in Tuscaloosa, Alabama called Holt High School. Holt was very good and had players that were going to Division I, and our team was very good my sophomore year. And we were losing 6-0. I was playing tight end and I got to run a route. I was in the back of the end zone. The quarterback threw it to me. It's a high pass. So I jump as high as I can and I catch the pass, and the defensive back hits me in the legs and flips me vertical. So I land on my head in the end zone, but I have the ball. Touchdown for the Choctaws. We go up 7-6. But when I landed on my head, there was a gasp in the crowd because it did not look good on film. The medical staff ran out and asked me, "What's your mother's maiden name?" just to make sure I was okay. And I said, "Ham." And they thought, "What's this guy talking about? Ham." That was actually my mother's maiden name, but they thought that I lost my marbles because I was talking about food. Sometimes you can give a correct answer and people still think you're crazy.
Yeah.
As you and I had talked about, my dad always wanted to be hard line with me because I was his son. And when that happened, my dad threw off his headphones and sprinted onto the field to make sure I was okay. So even though they're hard on you, they care. And sometimes when people are hard on you, it's because they see potential in you.
Wow. There's a great leadership lesson in that. Sometimes people just don't enjoy the fact that a leader might be hard on you. It may mostly be because of what they see in you. It's a shame that sometimes it takes landing on your head to have somebody sprint the field to tell you that. Coming out of your high school, only 10% of your graduating class went on to college, but you were part of that 10%. You were recruited originally to Texas A&M to play football, but then new leadership came in. The head coach that recruited you was fired. And in that leadership transition, things changed. The people that said, "Hey, come to be part of our organization," are suddenly no longer there. How did you handle it? And what would you take from that experience?
First of all, just the fact that I went from a town with 3,000 people to a university with close to 50,000 students, that was a shock to the system. And then when I went to Texas A&M to play, I'd been captain of the football team, captain of the baseball team, president of the student council, all state, a lot of accolades. So I quickly realized that what I had done in the past helped me get into school. But once I got there, no one cared. So the past was the past, and what mattered was the present. You had to prove yourself every single day. My grandfather once told me that winning's not something that you can own, it's something that you rent, and you got to pay your rent every single day. That's how it was when I went to college. They didn't care where I was from, what I'd done in the past. What was I doing for Texas A&M University at that moment in time? That was a bit of an awakening for me. And then we went through the season, and right after the first semester, Texas A&M was under investigation by the NCAA with potential of penalties, and the coach departed from the team. If you remember, at that time in the late 80s, that was after SMU had gotten the death penalty. So there was also fear of the death penalty.
Right.
Needless to say, my life was turned upside down. So my dreams of going to this big school and playing, everything was disrupted. And then during the Christmas break, we got a phone call at home in Brent, Alabama, from Bill Curry, who is the current coach. They wanted me to come join the University of Alabama. They knew what was happening at Texas A&M and asked me to transfer. That was a lifeline that the University of Alabama and Coach Curry had thrown me, because they had been recruiting me in high school as well and knew who I was and what I was capable of. So transitioned to Alabama in January of that year and was very excited to get started with the University of Alabama, where my father had played.
Isn't that incredible? Had that not happened, had Alabama not offered you that lifeline, I assume you would have gone back to Texas A&M?
Yes, I would have gone back to Texas A&M and played for Coach Slocum and the Aggies.
Wow. In your sophomore year at Alabama, it becomes apparent to you that you're probably not going to make money playing in the NFL one day. You had come, you thought maybe this was a future for you and that there might be another opportunity to play the sport professionally. Suddenly you realize not part of your path, and you decide to maybe take academics a little bit more seriously.
During that time, there was another coaching staff transition from Coach Bill Curry to Coach Gene Stallings. I was punting my sophomore year during Gene Stallings' first year as the head coach of the University of Alabama. In the first game against Southern Miss, I got hit in the chest because I bobbled a snap and then had to go and make a tackle during the game. So kind of a rough start to my first game. and a great introduction to top-notch D1 football. I was sore for 2 weeks after that. And then we were playing Florida, and I went out for a punt. Ball was snapped to me. Guy runs right up the middle, blocks the punt, and Florida scores a touchdown and won that game as well. Coach Stallings looked at me and said, "It's always the punter's responsibility to get the ball off no matter what. So that's on you." That guy just ran right up the middle. Like, no one touched him. And then I had to do a press conference, and they put the mic up and they said, "What happened on that play? It's punter's responsibility to get the ball off. It's on me."
In that moment, what you really want to say is, hey, offensive line, why didn't you block that guy? You had to stand there, own something that you could have easily blamed on someone else.
Looking back all these years later, being in a position of CEO, it's on me. Bad things happen. We have to take responsibility for it. When good things happen, there's many who can take credit for that. So you want to give the credit and then take the responsibility when things aren't working out. I learned that in the Alabama versus Florida game in 1990.
How have you managed to use that lesson? And I hate that the Gators won, in something that's been good for you as a leader at Polen.
That experience was one of the first nuggets of me learning about the power of trust within an organization, because by me taking responsibility for what happened in that moment, I gained deeper trust of my teammates, which deepens the power of the team itself. When you think about that at an organizational level, if you're protecting your employee base and learning from what happened, the growth mindset, so to speak, to learn from mistakes and then build the person to prevent that mistake from happening again, that goes a long way to building a healthy culture and organization.
Great point, because let's say I'm the lineman who whiffed on the block. I could have expected that when the microphone gets thrust in front of you, you could have called me out. You could have mentioned 67 back there, missed the block. And you accepting it had to make that lineman realize, wow, the whole world would easily not blame him if he had put it on me. That has to increase the bond, right, between you and those who were lined up to protect you in the future.
Absolutely. It helps build a bond, build friendships, most importantly, trust between you and your teammate.
I guess you couldn't blame the lineman on the punt that went into the band, though, right?
No, that was all on me.
That was all on you, right? So you're very intentional about creating a work environment that's built around trust. I know that's a huge word, not just internally between you and the team, but also organizationally, and also empowerment, because those were things that you didn't feel really existed for you previously. How did you take some of the lessons from your previous work and athletic experiences to help you develop a culture that meets the needs of the people who work with you today?
A lot of the experiences I had in previous work situations and athletically were really around what I would call a fixed mindset, in that there was high fear of failure and high repercussions to that failure. In other words, if you kick one in the bleachers, that could be the end of your college career. Or if a person made an error on the trading desk, that person could be terminated instantly from the firm. So when you're operating in an environment like that with higher levels of fear, that drives unintentional behaviors across the firm. And when we had the opportunity to transition the leadership, we said, we don't want to do it that way. We want to do it more with a growth mindset, and then learn from both winning and losing and failing and succeeding, to build a culture with a foundation of trust, and then build people up to where they can succeed and not have that fear of failure. That's been a huge component to the success at Polen Capital, and our culture actually being a competitive advantage.
Interestingly, what you're saying is that not all the things that you're working to build today were things that were positively modeled for you. Some of these were things where you took a lot of situations and reversed them out of a desire not to have other people live in that level of fear that you might have at some stages.
Absolutely. When you work and live in an environment, you have feelings. So you know how you felt when something happened, or when someone spoke to you in a certain way, or you took a certain action. And then you learn a lot from those actions and what happened, and then how you felt in that particular moment. And a lot of times you remember negative things more than you do positive things. Take those learnings and you learn a tremendous amount from seeing things done incorrectly many times. And then package that and say, well, how would I like to be treated? How would I like to feel when I go to work every day? How would I like to be treated if I make an error? How would I like to be treated if we have a big success? How would we want to be treated if we were in any place that we would work?
It's interesting, Stan. One of the things that I know has often been a challenge for high culture organizations, places that value culture, as I know you all do, is that sometimes you end up with a lot of employees who begin their careers in your environment and they kind of half grow to expect that that's the way it is everywhere. That, boy, we've been living and working this way for the last several years. It almost becomes a point of expectation. How do you continue to remind people that this is different and that we want them to appreciate the effort put together to maintain great cultures?
For those that came from other organizations, it's easier because they can contrast and compare. And having the ability to contrast and compare is invaluable. People who are new to the organization can learn from others. We also offer internal mentorship programs where they can learn from others internally or perhaps externally. But it's a futile exercise to try to convince someone that it's better here than somewhere else. So we rather focus our attention on the here and now and what we're about. Going to both Texas A&M and the University of Alabama, the organization itself had built over decades a brand around high quality, success, and winning. People would just go to Texas A&M or to the University of Alabama just because it's the Texas A&M or the University of Alabama. And there's great pride just to get to put on the jersey. If we can create an organization that's high quality across the board at the highest level of standards, and people are proud to put on our jersey, that's what we're looking for. That transcends from the person who came straight out of college to a person who transferred here or changed jobs from another organization.
And at a certain stage, you begin to see that. You don't do it by winning one season and then suddenly people start looking at you as culturally iconic. It takes a while, but you have to stay at it. That's a lesson that you all have really put together at Polen.
Absolutely. You have to be intentional about every single thing that you do and then be consistent. At our firm, we're intentional about high quality, whether it be our office space, the food that we bring in for everyone each and every day, to the strategies and presentation materials that we give to our clients. We want to be quality across the board, and then very intentional about maintaining and growing that standard. So when you bring in everyone to the organization, the standard's high, you need to meet that standard.
In sports, external events or rivalries can be motivators. They can actually kind of fire you up to bring a little extra effort. In business, what motivates you?
I'm not going to lie to you. Winning business is exciting.
Right.
In business, you're playing a never ending game. There's no clock. We can sit here and we can wait on the fat pitch as long as it takes to wait on that fat pitch, and then take a swing when we think it's necessary. Patience and discipline is really helpful in building a successful, long-term oriented organization. And of course, we do also have competitive firms out in the marketplace. I'm not going to call out any specific names, but I will say that we're not the University of Alabama of our industry. So anytime we get to go up one of the larger firms, the University of Alabama's of our industry, and we win, it is quite special.
I like it. By the way, I love all this Texas A&M, Alabama conversation, given that right now what's going on in the world of sports, Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher, the two head coaches of those teams, taking shots at each other. I'm going to assume you're going to be saving all the way.
In our industry, I found camaraderie among the CEOs. Many of us are dealing with very similar issues. Being able to pick up the phone and call the CEO of a peer or competitive firm and have a great chat with them is something that's special about our industry. And I hope that Coach Saban and Coach Fisher can pick up the phone and talk to one another and work this thing out.
I'm going to guess that's not happening this week, but it's a good lesson. We'll make sure to send a note to both of them and say that that's your suggestion as a former wearer of both jerseys. So many people refer to their corporate organizations as teams. The truth is, for most of those folks who talk about their team, quote unquote, what they really are leading is just a group of individual contributors who all have their own individual sets of goals, and they just happen to be carrying the same business card. But you know what it's like to be part of a team. You've had that experience on a number of different levels. If you're coaching one of our listeners who's trying to take those individual superstars and actually try to build them together as an organizational unit, what are some of the elements that you would encourage them to help develop in order to pull together those independent contributors?
Coach Bear Bryant once said, it's not about the X's and the O's, it's about the Billies and the Joes. You've got to get the talent into your organization. You want the best talent possible to come into your organization. And then once you attract that talent to your organization, you need to put structure in place and provide the resources necessary for that team building. And some of the structure that we put in place is learnings around culture, from our continuous learning budgets to our culture club, our triennial meetings. They're all about personal and professional development. And then as we started with our storytelling, so you can get to know one another. Because what we want people to do is you bring the talent into the organization. We want each team member to be able to successfully bond with other teammates to the point where you actually care and want your teammate to be successful. And if we can reach that point, then that will permeate throughout the organization, and that leads to a winning team, because you're about more than yourself. Then it becomes about the organization, the brand, and that pride that you have in winning as an organization.
That's it.
Most talented people who come to our organization, if you look at their backgrounds, they have demonstrated high levels of achievement throughout their history. So these people are usually avid learners just by nature. They're wanting to learn more. What we can do as an organization is to provide them with resources. We provide every single person in our firm with a $5,000 budget. We also provide external speakers, trainers, resources that are here on a continuous basis. And then we provide mentorship and all kinds of learnings at our firm. So what we're doing is we're providing the structure and the framework that gives them the resources to enable them to grow as individuals throughout the course of their career at Polen Capital. I want people's resumes to get better. When they join our organization, I want their resume to be so much improved that almost anyone in the industry would want to hire this person at any time. But I want them to stay here because they want to, because our culture is outstanding.
And unfortunately, sometimes they get flirted with and it looks attractive to go somewhere else. This is that place, though, where as a leader, you have to keep reminding the organization that what we're doing here is bigger than ourselves. You have to continue that dialogue constantly. What kind of advice would you give to other leaders on how they can continue to remind their team that what you're working to be part of here is in fact special? Is there something that you all do that helps drive that conversation regularly?
Is about purpose. We want every single person who joins our organization to have a deep connection to the purpose of the organization. In other words, like why we do what we do. We put a lot of intention and detail around that why. And we focus on having each person think through, why do we exist as an organization? First of all, we're here to serve our clients. So we have pictures of our clients up on the wall so you never lose sight of why we're doing what we're doing. There's a policeman, a fireman, a teacher, a doctor, a nurse on the other side of the accounts that we're managing. And that's who we're trying to provide financial security and peace of mind to over the long term. A couple of things that we do around the client. We'll have a group of firemen come in and say, why is what you do important to us? We'll have a fireman sit there and say, like, I'm the first person to go to college in my family, and this pension plan helped pay for my kids to go to college. What you do is impacting my financial security. So when you have the actual client sitting there telling you how important it is to them, and they're a public servant, wow, does that connect to purpose?
Amen.
having each individual connect to, like, here's the people we're serving, and here's what we're trying to do for them over the long term, and here's the benefit, is extremely helpful. As a successful organization, we're able to do a lot for the community. We just recently were able to grant over 80 wishes to the Make-A-Wish Foundation of Southern Florida. That corporate activity and giving back to the community and helping children in any way we can really helps connect people to that purpose as well. So when you think about it holistically, we're taking care of our clients, we're taking care of one another, and we're taking care of the community. And if you want to be part of that, come to Polen Capital.
I love it. One of the things that I do know about that experience with Make-A-Wish is that you don't just stroke a check. You actually have, on several occasions, had the wish children come to your office to find out that their wish is about to come true. What a neat way for all those people who are working every day and going, gosh, I wonder what all this means, to see a little girl realize she's going to get to go to Disney and be a princess. There's nothing cooler and more inspiring to the entire group. Tell me about that and how those kinds of moments inspire the team.
Thank you for bringing that up, because we've had the very special opportunity to see wish children live and being delivered their wish. In some cases, they're telling us about the wish, but in some cases, we've been able to actually see the wish granted in the moment. One wish was the delivery of a golf cart, and we had it delivered at our office to the child. To see that child's face light up, to see the family in tears, it really, really drives that connection. So seeing things live in action really brings it home for people, as opposed to just hearing about it or watching a video.
They can feel it.
Yep.
They could feel the moment. That's pretty awesome. Stan Moss, it is always a pleasure. I love our conversations. I love getting a chance to learn, listen, and grow with you. And today I got an opportunity to enjoy listening to you be a corporate competitor. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for all your help to me personally and to Polen Capital.
Wow. I'm a huge Stan Moss fan. As you can tell by listening to the conversation, I have learned from him and been in relationship with him for many years. So it was exciting today to be able to share him with all the rest of you. And for all the stories that I knew of him, we'd never talked about his grandfather and that really powerful lesson. Winning isn't anything you own. You just rent success. You just rent it. You have to pay the rent daily. What a great lesson. And I love how Stan was able to use that to not let what he had achieved in his past make him believe that he was automatically guaranteed something in the future. I continue to watch him, and I know that that's true even in the way he lives and conducts his business today. The second really great story was around the failure he had as a punter, where his punt got blocked and it got returned for a touchdown. And the coach's statement had always been the punter's responsibility is to get the ball off, no matter what, get the ball off. He knew that the reason the punt was blocked was not his fault. There was a rusher who hadn't been blocked. But when given the opportunity to answer the question, Stan stood in and said, punter's responsibility is to kick the ball. I didn't. It's on me. The trust that engendered between him and the lineman, the trust that engendered between him and his teammates is something that you cannot go out and manufacture. It has to come from an honest and straightforward ownership of tough moments. Stan talked about how he has continued to use that in his leadership model. And then the last piece that really caught my attention was how that so much of what Stan has built into a culture that's recognized professionally as one of the best places to work, many of the elements of that culture came through bad experiences. They came to Stan and his leadership team through experiences they had had negatively in previous working environments, previous playing environments. How are you taking those tough times? How are you taking the things that are difficult in your space? Are you using them to grow? Are you using them to help you build better? That's what Stan does at Polen Capital, and we can all be better for it. Let's go out and be better corporate competitor. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir. How are
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.